Hi, my name is Daryl. Welcome to Chapter 5, Window Installation in the Sprinter Van Build series. Today we will be discussing the installation of RB Components bed window, which is a 10 by 36 inch window. Let's get going. This is my Sprinter van, and today we are going to be discussing putting a windows on the side above the bed area of the van. A couple things we need to be aware of is, as you can see, there's these contours in the van on the inside, and we need to be planning for all of that. I did not take a lot of photos in this series, but I definitely wanted to go over it because there were some things in here that I thought might be interesting in the way that I approached the trim pieces inside of the van, because I wanted to make it nice and clean. So I hope you get something out of this video. First thing you do is, when you get your windows from RB Components, you're going to need to make a wooden template, because when you install the window, you have the window, then the window goes against the van, and you're going to use this caulking tape on the outside of the window to secure it to the van. And then on the inside, you have to put a wooden trim piece. And the first thing you're going to do, you're going to make the wooden trim piece. So we just trace it out on some plywood here. And I think this is 3/16 inch plywood that I used. So the first thing we did is we flipped it over and we drew out the outside of the window pattern, and then on the inside I just took a pencil and went onto the inside ring, because there's two dimensions there. Then once I had that, this is what we have. The next thing I just took a jigsaw and cut this template out. I cut this out with a jigsaw. So this template is going to be used for two things. Number one, you need to be able to have a template that you're going to draw and cut out the hole in the van. So this will be used on the outside of the van to mark your template. But if you don't do what I'm going to show you on how to build out a trim piece, this piece will be required on the inside of the van. One of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to create a finished trim piece. So we do need to have some piece of plywood against the van inside, because the trim ring is going to go against this wood piece and pull the window together to the van and create a sandwich. I decided what I was going to do is take a 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch wood frame around here, that then what I'd be able to do is to secure my interior wall panels to, and still act as this wooden trim piece that needed to go into the window anyway. So what I did is I took that ring that I had drawn out before, I transferred that onto this piece of wood. And like I said, then what I did is I wanted to make sure I had 1.5 inch section going around. So when I was done, this is what my inside template and my inside trim piece was going to look like. So the next thing I wanted to do is I was going to take 1.5 inch trim on each end of this. All I did is I cut out my pieces, I just laid them out. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do the inside corners, because I wanted those round. So what I did here was I drilled into 3/4 inch pine, created some circles, and then I was going to take these and make my corner pieces by cutting them on a chop saw, and then cut them into corners, and then these would be my inside corners. Next step is I took my Kreg jig, I drilled my pocket holes, I then glued my frames and screwed them. And the next thing that I did was took those 3/4 inch half or quarter circles, two of them together, and I glued them and let them dry into the corner. After that, I took wood putty, filled it in, sanded it down, and this was now my wooden frame for the inside of my van. This is what it would look like. I did not have enough pictures, but we would have now the inside corners, and this is the piece that would go inside of the van. I painted mine black, and everything here is glued. Unfortunately, I didn't have a picture for this, but I just wanted to show you that. So the next thing that we needed to do was we needed to make sure that we have room for this inside of the van. As you can see inside of the van, this is where it's going to go. Are going to need to cut out these support pieces here. And the way that I did that very carefully was I used a grinding disc and just cut these out here and here and here once I took my measurements from my template. The next thing I did is once I had these pieces out, I then had my trim piece in, and then I drew the template around here, and then I drilled pilot holes through the van in the 4 different areas, and then they came out on the other side. Then I took the smaller template and then taped this hole outside because I was going to be cutting from the outside. I taped this with painter's tape, put my template on, drew my the hole that I was going to cut, and I just cut it out with a saber saw, a fine tooth saber saw. And take your time with this and make sure that's all taped, because this will start to vibrate and the sheet metal will be jumping all over the place when you're doing it. Then once you had your hole cut, you just put this in there to make sure that it was a good fit. The next thing that you do is you're going to take the caulking tape that they provide, you put that on the window, you put it in, and then on the inside, as I mentioned, this is the wooden trim piece. You can see I cut the frame out. And on here, because of the edges, this was rounded. I did need to trim that off, and this trimmed off. These areas here were fine. Then this is how the trim piece looked. The window went in, and this is another piece of aluminum trim that will then screw into the outside window and then pull that all tight together. So this is on the driver's side. This is, the driver's side in the US. So this is, if we're standing at the back of the van, this is the left side of the van. And here's a closer picture. And these are the trim screws that I mentioned. These screws here, you could barely see them because it's all black, but this actually screws into the outside window, and then it pulls in, and you can see all these corner pieces are all rounded here. Now when I'm ready, I'll be able to take my wall material and then actually screw it into this frame and then trim that out, and it will be nice and clean. This is on the passenger side. And here you can see the screws as well. These screw into the frame, and you can see how this is rounded off. The next thing that I did is I took a router and I just trimmed it, and it trimmed out. And then it gave me a nice clean trim area. The other thing that I did here is these are marine snaps, and what I was going to do is have window curtains done here, and I was just going to snap those into place on the window curtains when I wanted them. I hope you learned a couple tricks. Again, please go to RB Components website. There is a little bit more information over there. It's a great site to go look at. They're very helpful on the phone as well. But if you have any questions, just please put the comments in.